MG,
Hey.
I came over to your house over the weekend and I got a little cuddle of Talia. She was a dream. No crying, no nothing. No, what are you talking about?
Oh man, she didn't even stir once. You were here for hours. She didn't stir once, did she?
No, she was so good.
How
baby whisperer.
How excited were me and I to just go for a walk and get a coffee?
I know. As soon as we got there, you're like, all right, we've got to feed her and then let's go get a coffee, let's go for a walk, let's get out of there. And it was like the highlight of your day.
Yeah, the little things, man, that life changes so much, obviously for the better, but a little 20-minute walk and an excursion to the coffee shop with friends is like, a night at, the club or the bar used to be as an 18-year-old. Like that's just like a massive win. But yeah, she was amazing actually. She's been really, man, the last sort of 3 or 4 days have been night and day from where we were. I think last night, man, she went 5.5 hours straight, which is
that's wow.
I mean, we were getting 2 to 3 at best. So she's starting to really stretch out a little bit, which is nice, to the point where me woke up during the night. I was like, did I feed and just was I sleeping? I don't even remember it because it's been like 5.5 hours. It's like, no, she didn't wake up. So definitely seeing some improvements, but it's such a beautiful thing, man. But she definitely soothed you, man. She looked great in your eyes.
Yeah, I'm one of those nervous holders. I don't know if
you
you
were.
noticed.
You're like just. Can I just say what you said? This is what MT said, Scotty. You love this. You got your friend that is hasn't held like a million babies, so it's like, all right. He said, okay, you just place her where she needs to go.
And then he didn't move the whole time.
No, and then I picked her up and it was warm, so she was sweaty. He was sweaty because no one even moved. Like,
I didn't want to move. Like, you know how babies are, their necks and their heads. I was like, okay, just place her in my arms. I won't move. I promise.
Place her in my arms.
Yeah.
And she's probably a lot bigger now. Like when you first get her, man, they're literally like just sat in your hand. But you've got decent sized hands. I think with babies, if you've got big hands, it's so easy because you just sort of have, I don't know about you, MG, but you use your thumb and your middle finger to hook around, and then your back finger sort of just supports the head. So it's if you've got big hands, it's actually very easy. So
yeah, I'll put her over my shoulder. She loves over the shoulder. She'll cop a cradle every now and then, but she loves over the shoulder. And I can just literally do the one hand, which if I feel like she's got a bit of gas or whatever, I can hold her one hand and let her legs hang, not have to sit under her bum because my hand's big enough. And it tends to give her a bit of relief sometimes because I'm not crunching her legs up. So it does make a big difference, man.
Can you tell Scotty about the TikTok thing about making her pass gas and what you did?
So, you know how social media floods you with videos, with the algorithm on things that are relevant in your life based on whatever you're searching. So clearly I'm either watching a lot of baby videos or I'm going on Google, and which I'm doing a lot, tips and tricks on how to manage things or, just being a better parent or routine and things like that. So, I said, I've got this thing to do that, help her when she's got gas or she needs to pass wind, which is basically lie her on her back on my legs together and just rotate her legs clockwise and then counterclockwise, and then I get them to kick. I've done it a million times. Never, ever worked, honestly. But I did it in front of MT. First go, I did it exactly to sequence. Big fart. I was like, oh, yes.
Oh, there you go.
It was like clockwork, but I hadn't told him that it had never worked before.
Yeah.
Until after it.
Yeah. Oh, man. I could just imagine, like, there's probably so many little tips and tricks that are online now, TikTok, whatever, it's just, that's good. It's good.
It's definitely, sometimes it can overstimulate you to the point of like, you've got so many different bits of information. I just try and keep the attitude as like, there's probably things that work for some people and don't work for others. Try what works for you. If you get a little tip and it works, great. If you get a little tip and it doesn't work, don't get too caught up in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How's it been going with you, Scotty? How's it over there?
Yeah, it's good, man. Yeah, it's Tuesday morning here. So, and we were just saying before, because of the time difference, it's 11:05, so it's a bit later. So, because our daylight savings changed, so we lost an hour, but then you guys get back an hour this weekend. I was just saying. So, but no, it's good. Easter done and dusted. Kids had heaps of fun. The whole Easter bunny thing. Did the rice? Jen and I did the rice flour on the bench, and we made like little paw prints. And I'll have to send you guys a video of the kids when they walked in, but Evie was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's gross, man.
Yeah, and the Easter egg hunt. So no, it was good, man. But otherwise, it's just, I can't believe it's April. We're saying before the shows are starting in a couple of weeks. It's crazy. Like, I'm getting peak week plans ready. I just feel like we just finished season B and it's season A again. It's come around quick.
Yeah, it really has.
That's actually what I wanted to talk about. So we've got a bunch of questions, but I think it would be really, really good for us to go over peak week basics. So what traditionally would happen in a peak week? I know always subject to change. Everyone's kind of different, but maybe let's roll through what would normally happen in a peak week. We can talk about what you do with training, what you do with steps and cardio, what you do with food, carbs, sodium, water, etc. Let's just go back over the basics, because I know a lot of people are going through their peak weeks over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, this week is the first one because I know IFB New South Wales is this weekend and ICN Rookie Show is this weekend. So the shows are kicking off. So how about we start off with, what would you expect to see in a peak week plan from your coach? What level of detail should it go into? So I don't know, MG, do you want to talk about what do you do? What do you present to your client when you are telling them this is what we're doing for peak week? Like, is there a document, a shared document? What do you do?
Yeah. So I sent a Word document. So with the software which we use, which is Kahunas, which is kind of like an all-in-one that has everything in there, their training program, their plan. So it's all listed in there. But what I do for peak week is I actually separate the week's plan onto a Word document and basically break down everything. So I'll break down day by day what the training is. So, what they're training for that day. So it might be Monday pull, Tuesday legs, and then all the way basically up to show day. And I'll do the same with food. So if it's someone who is on a macro plan, I'll stipulate what the macros are. And then if it's someone on a meal plan, it'll be there a touch meal plan for each of the days that week as well. And it'll cover everything, man. It'll cover steps for the week, expenditure, cardio, sleep. Then there'll be a separate show day plan as well. So like I'll provide a separate Word document for a show day plan. So which will go down into detail, literally from what time to wake up, what time meal one is, what to do with everything in between. For all of my female competitors, I'll always get their schedule in terms of appointments, and I'll map out the logistics of timing, even to like what time they should leave their house to get to the venue, all that type of stuff. But yeah, I like to think of it as like, someone who's in peak week, somebody's been dieting for a long period of time, doesn't really need the stress of having to work out the logistics of, climbing. And I map out every single detail that you could think of for a peak week, and I put it on a Word document because I think it's nice for them to print out and have it in front of them. And then we can get into like the specifics of what the peak week would look like. But that's kind of like, I'm pretty sure you boys are very similar to that. We provide a very detailed overview of, the Monday all the way through to show day, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, with a separate sort of peaking protocol for the day itself, because that, is something that we assess as we go based on how the look is evolving. Again, based on what strategy that we're implementing, whether it's an early carb load or a back end carb load. So I don't typically supply a show day plan until later on in the week.
Yeah. Are you pretty much the same, Scotty? A detailed plan that you present to the client. It'll explain what to do every day, from steps, cardio, food, water, sodium, weigh-in times, check-in times, photos, how to distribute carbohydrate, when to train, all that kind of stuff. Will it go into all that kind of detail?
Yeah, so as you guys know, I use a Excel template that I've built in how everything's periodized, and it has the different tabs. So it'll always have the week. Like, let's just say it's from next week, it will have, depending on their check-in day, but it will run from basically like Monday through to Sunday. And then it'll give the example if there's any changes to the training. So usually training's pretty consistent, unless depending on the category, they might have a leg day that's reduced earlier in the week. Otherwise, their last leg day might be 8 or 9 days. It depends. Some athletes can train legs 7 days out and they're good. Others who suffer from some inflammation and edema, we might hold back and we need to, reduce load and volume. And then things like you said, that this template has everything. So the day, whether the steps come down, whether there's an increase in fluid for whatever reason, but electrolytes don't ever really change until basically just the day of the show. But sometimes if we're pushing in a little bit more carbohydrate, we'll obviously push in a bit more fluid to help partition it, especially if they're going from, so you've got a guy who's eating 100 grams of carbs to 400 grams, you need a bit more fluid to help partition that. And if you need more fluid, then you obviously need a bit more sodium as well. And then usually check-in pics will come through. I'll usually touch base with the athlete every day in peak week, but pics will come through from probably 5 days out. First thing in the morning fasted, and then post-training, except for once we're starting our carb up process, it'll be first thing in the morning after they work out and then before they sleep, just so that we can assess the look. And we'll have a plan. There'll always be a plan. This is what we want to do, but equally it's subject to change, and you auto regulate as you go. Like, you might anticipate to push in X, Y, and Z, but you get to Thursday and you realize we need more, or maybe we don't need to push as hard and we need to pull back. So I think you need to have that at your disposal. And then, as MG said, the Word document, I usually do that for the day before the show. They'll have their meal plan for every single day on what they're eating. My athletes don't employ flexible dieting. It's just, this is what I'm giving them. And again, it's usually like that the whole way through their prep. And then on the show day, it's from what time to wake up to when to pump up to when they have the coffee. And then you're communicating, have you had a bowel movement? How are you feeling? How are you looking? Because as we all know, the look can change. So you need to find the look that you like and then hold it. But hopefully, if you've had enough time, you've been able to sort of put some test peak weeks in play. I had that for last week for a few of my athletes. And again, plans that we had originally thought we were going to implement, we will now slightly adjust based on that data that we got last week. So you'll always have a longitudinal plan for what it will look like. But again, it's always communicated that this is subject to change, because peak week, it's a dynamic piece and things can change, hourly, especially when you've got someone that's very, very lean.
Mm-hmm. I pretty much do the same thing as you guys with the documentation and presenting it to the client. The only thing that I also do, and it's just after years of getting so many questions and doing so many peak weeks, is I've done like an audio recording, like an educational recording that pretty much answers all those questions. And I send that through to them probably 4 or 5 weeks out, and just be like, hey, listen to this. This kind of tells you a little bit about, what's going to happen in prep for the last couple of weeks and also on show day, just to kind of give them an idea to cover all the basics. So I don't get the same questions all the time by every single client. Other than that, I'd send out to them maybe some supplements they might need to buy prior to the show they use on show day, like salt tablets, that kind of stuff. Make sure they have citrulline, those kind of things. And also I've got like a list of things to pack for show day. So these are just things that I've gathered over time that I constantly get asked about. So now I've just got it in emails and send it across to everyone. But other than that, I'll sit down like what you guys do, present a plan to them that's very, very similar to what you guys explained. So you kind of touched on training, Scotty. Maybe we can start on that. So typically, how does training look like in a peak week? And maybe you can talk about cardio at the same time. So training and cardio typically for a peak week.
So it would depend on where the athlete is at. If you're content with the conditioning and the look that you have and you're no longer trying to refine things, if that's the case, then you want to gradually start to reduce that. Hopefully, if you've had the ability to do that, maybe you've been doing 60 minutes, maybe it's down to 30. And then really from, let's say that the show's on Saturday for whatever. I mean, my guys are on Sunday. I think the girls are on Saturday for the expo. I think that's how it works. But if it was on the Saturday, then you would be reducing that from probably maybe Wednesday's your last cardio day, because maybe that's your last day of digging, and then you're going to start to push in some carbohydrate. And so with training would stay pretty consistent for me for the most part. But again, I would reverse engineer back. Okay, so the day before the show is probably going to be just an upper, light pump-based session. We use the term a GT, glucose transfer session, so to help partition that carbohydrate. If it's girls, maybe there's some glutes in there. If you've got a physique athlete or a bodybuilder that maybe, and you've tested this process before, that their legs look wicked after maybe just a set of some leg extensions to help, squeeze, maybe move some of that water, then that can be beneficial. But you'd usually work out, I'd usually go, so if it's a Sunday, Friday would be basically like a pump session. Thursday would be the same, but it's usually a little bit longer. And then Wednesday, depending on the athlete's physique, what areas are stronger versus weaker, but it might be a push session. I usually don't have pull on a Wednesday if it's 3 days out. For whatever reason, with a lot of my guys, they just tend to maybe hold a little bit more fluid or be a little bit sorer as a result of that versus push. So we'd usually have that on a Tuesday, and then legs would normally be at the start of the week on the Monday, unless they were in a category where they needed to be like if they were men's fitness or if it was classic or bodybuilding, then that might be on the Saturday or the Sunday. But usually it would stay on the Monday, but we've just got some recommendations that there's nothing to failure, loads reduced, and we're looking at like, maybe one top set, and that's really it. So you might have like 12 sets for the entire session. It's literally just to get some blood in there, get some data, have a look at things, and then go from there. And then really from 5-6 days out, everything should be pretty much business as usual.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And then I know you kind of mentioned cardio. So obviously steps, cardio, that'll all taper off. And hopefully by, let's just call it Wednesday or so, somewhere before that carb up process maybe, is all that starts to taper off so that they can reduce fatigue, increase recovery, and all the extra food they're eating is not going and just getting burnt off by all the cardio and the steps they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So cardio will usually come out if they're running it. Once carbohydrate starts to go in, then we'll take that out, because otherwise you're just offsetting what you're trying to push in. But with the steps, depending on the athlete, where their food's at and how much carb you're pushing in, if you're reducing all of these other these other components of training, you also need to be mindful of you don't want to screw around with digestion. So if you've got someone who's eating 100 grams of carbs and now you want to take them up to 3 or 350, then you're going to completely reduce expenditure. Sometimes that can cause some issues with partitioning it, and also just with upsetting their stomach. So I'm a big advocate of, once they eat a meal, let it sit for a bit, wait sort of 20 minutes, and then just go for maybe a 15-20 minute walk, help move it around, come back, and then sort of stay off your feet. But if you've got an athlete that's doing 12,000 steps on average per day, usually, and let's say that Wednesday might be say 10,000, and then Thursday might be 8,000, the day before might be just miscellaneous movement. Go for a light walk after each meal, put your feet up, but there's no target. But there's also, when you go to the shops, don't park miles away so that you can get your steps in to go and get what you need to get. You just be sensible. But equally, if you do 5,000 and your coach says, I only wanted you to do 3, in the scheme of things, at that point in prep, your expenditure for walking is very, very low. So the likelihood of you churning through that, versus if you're sightseeing, in Korea or something of that nature, then that's a little bit different.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, that makes complete sense. So MG, what about, we spoke about training, we spoke about steps. Is there any kind of big differences that you'll make with, say, the types of foods they're eating? Is there anything that you would remove in peak week? Are we talking like sweeteners and those kind of things? Like, is there anything that you would do differently from what they're actually intaking?
Yeah, so I typically anything that I would have removed would have already been done. I wouldn't really leave it to peak week. For me, for my athletes, depending on the feedback that I've gotten over the last 4 weeks leading up to peak week, like if they're having things like a coffee with an equal or a Coke Zero, and they've never had any issues of it, I'm not someone who feels like they need to be pulling that out 1 week out. However, if they feel like every now and then a Coke Zero might give them a little bit of digestive discomfort or a little bit of gas or reflux, then I'll say, look, for 1 week, let's just not have it and not put ourselves at risk of running into any problems. But typically, man, for me, it's mainly only on show day that I'll say just don't have anything like that. But otherwise, up until the eve of the show, normal intake of that type of stuff. If you've been having it for your whole entire prep, I've got no problem with it staying in. What I will say for clients that I have that flexible diet leading up sort of to peak week, we may take a little bit more charge of the nutrition that they're intaking. And, you and I use the terminology of like growing things up a little bit and just cleaning things up and, having something that's pretty plain and boring that they've been able to eat all the way through, but make it more consistent. Remove any special sauces or anything that, is fun to have sometimes, but just doesn't need to be there for that last 4 or 5 days, just to eliminate any risk of anything going wrong. Also, I suppose the big changer for the week is, how we implement and utilize carbohydrates to enhance the look is probably the biggest, point for discussion, I reckon.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same there. There's like, we might just be super safe and maybe remove sweeteners, a couple of days before the show, those kind of things. But other than that, everything else stays pretty much the same. We may look at fiber and reducing fiber and being mindful of that, especially if carbohydrates coming up during that time. But everything is still pretty similar and typical. As you kind of said, we'll just make sure that they're eating most of the same thing every day and making it really simple. And if they are going to be carbing up on certain carbohydrate sources, got to make sure it's things that they've had before, used before, that they digest well and things like that.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the good things that Scott touched on before, which a lot of people, I've seen some stuff taking over with clients and some people who are implementing strategies, but probably don't understand the mechanics as to why they're doing it. We spoke about, hydration, right? And how, being adequately hydrated is enough. And people prescribe crazy amounts of water, right? Because they don't really understand why they're prescribing crazy amounts of water, but someone did it in the gym 10 years ago. And it's like, it'll help you look drier, right? Because when you stop drinking water, then this magic process will happen. But the real reason is, which Scott touched on earlier, is like, if you're taking in, you're currently having 200 grams of carbon, all of a sudden you start to undulate that carb load, and now it's 3, and then it's 375. A little bit of extra water to facilitate that is beneficial, but you don't need to be going from 3 to 9 liters.
Yeah.
So I think there's some what's the word for? It's like they use it in The Wolf of Wall Street. It's like a fugazi around the methodology of why people do things. But there is actually reasons as to why some things that you hear of, like, might be classed as like a bromide, have some reasoning or rationale behind them, but not for the reasons people tend to think.
Yeah. There's no real extremes that need to be done in peak week. The only extreme is probably your carbohydrates going to go to a level that maybe it hasn't been for in a while. That's pretty much the only extreme. Everything else is more trying to reduce fatigue, reduce steps, reduce training fatigue, training load and volume potentially, all that kind of stuff.
Like a ton of common sense stuff, right? And even then, we've heard stories of girls, you're talking about carbs that go, might be a little bit more extreme, and you said it as well. It's like, not to anything that you haven't done in the past, right? So if, you're a female competitor on 130 grams of carb, and, maybe on your high days throughout your prep, you went up to 2 or 220, you might start somewhere there. But we've heard athletes that have come across to our teams that have been prescribed 800 and 900 grams of carb in a peak week in the bikini division. Like that type of stuff still goes on out there.
I think, sometimes people feel like it's a carb loading competition, and the coaches like to post how much they're loading their clients.
Who can load the most?
Yeah, who can load the most? Like, it's a competition. Look at my client, I'm loading them with 900 grams of carbs. It's like, I look at them like, that's just silly. Like, why are you doing that to a bikini athlete? That's just silly. It's not a carb loading competition. It's definitely not. You've got to put the right amount in to get the result you want. It's not about trying to put the maximum amount in that this person can handle it. It's not a competition.
And ultimately, that load, the effectiveness of that load is conditioning specific. Like, you've got to be at a certain composition to really get the benefit from it. And I think a lot of times, we've seen, or you see someone reshare something, it's like peak week, probably not at the level of body fat required to warrant this type of load, but posting about crazy amounts of carb loads, when really, maybe if your extra days dieting might have been a better use of the week.
Yeah, exactly. So we spoke about carb loading now. MG, typically, how many days of a carb load do you do for a show? Typically, for most.
Yeah, so let's just say for a Saturday show, I've got a pretty, consistent strategy I use all the time. For a Saturday show, I like to start early in the week and sort of undulate, which for the listeners just basically means that I'll start, let's say you're on 100 grams, I'm just using a number. Undulate, I'll go up a little bit. So I'll go Tuesday, I might go 150, and then Wednesday will be my highest day. So if you imagine it as a graph, I'm starting to come up, and then I'll taper things back down slightly. So Thursday might be like 180, and then that gives me Friday to either go harder, or if I've gone too hard, a day to correct it. So I like that because it gives me ample time to be able to get things right. And in all of my trials with all of my athletes leading up to competition, that's the methodology I use. So I want to mirror that same methodology, because if I've trialed it and it's worked, I'm not going to, you know, start backloading when I've never backloaded that person before.
Mhm.
But I like to start earlier on in the week. I know that, you know, sometimes that means you have to hold it for longer, but because it is undulating, it gives you a little bit more flexibility and space to get things right.
Yeah, I really like to use that method sometimes too, is, you know, try to get that look early and then maintain it, and not trying to chase it. And you're like, okay, more carbs tomorrow. Oh, we've got to go more again. And you're just trying to chase it all the way up until the show.
Yeah.
And you don't really know where you're going to land on show day, because you're just trying to increase because you haven't been, I'm not saying aggressive enough, but you haven't secured the look earlier in the week.
Yeah.
What do you think, Scotty? What kind of approach do you like to use? How many typical carb up days do you normally have for most athletes?
It'll depend on the athlete, how much muscle mass they have. Because I think this is the other thing. People don't understand, like they just think, oh, you got to eat lots of carbs. But the bigger the athlete, the more tissue they have. Because the whole point of taking on board more carbohydrate is to saturate muscle glycogen stores. And so if you have a small bikini athlete, then they're not going to need, and then it's probably not even really going to make a difference. But even if you have a small fitness or a small sports athlete, if we're talking about females, they're still probably not going to need heaps. Like they might be topped up, you know, maybe 350 grams, you know, done, or 400 grams max over 1.5 days is probably going to do that for you. Because you got to remember, expenditure is going down as well. So you got to find that right balance. And you also want to try and improve gastric motility. What you don't want is to push in all this food and then you've got distension and you're bloated and digestion's crap, because you can't just go from you being very, very small amounts of food and then think that you can just 2x that and that everything is going to be hunky-dory. It doesn't always work like that. So I would usually, if I have the time and the ability to do so, it would be starting on a Wednesday, so pushing more in. Again, let's say that their baseline intakes were, I'll use one of my guys for next week. So what we're probably going to run, it will be his baseline low days have been like 175. We know that his thresholds around about, in terms of what he can tolerate, this is over a 2-day period, we ran back-to-back days at 400. So we'll go 300 on day one. We'll go 375 to 400, depending on the look, how we feel, digestion on day two. And then we'll pull back to probably around about 300 the day before the show. We'll also pull back on protein so that, again, we're allowing for better digestion. And then we'll probably push fats later in the day just to hold the look. And then we'll feed him very, very minimal on show day, so the midsection's super tight. There's not a lot of food, you know, in digestion, and equally, he's not really doing anything the day before the show. So that carbohydrate's not going to fade away, but we'll know based on how he pumps up. If he gets a pump straight away and it's ridiculous, as it should be, he's topped up, then he should be good to go. But if he doesn't, and you know you've pushed in all that food and he hasn't expended all that carbohydrate, then it's likely a fluid or it's an electrolyte issue. So he probably needs a bit more salt, or maybe he needs a bit more fluid. And that's where, you know, I'm big on assessing hydration status the morning of. So we use a WUT rating. So they wake up, look at their weight, look at the urine color, and then perception of thirst. And so using those metrics to gauge, are they hydrated? Are, you know, blood sodium levels where they need to be? And again, we'll know that based on that first pump up. They wake up, fasted, do a 5-minute pump, see how they feel, how they look. And if they're blowing up like a balloon, then you know everything's there. And so you're good to go. But if you don't, then you know that you need to work out what it is and what you need to do to attenuate the problem.
Yeah, it's a really good point you touched on. Is I think sometimes people have this perception that all this carbohydrate's just going to get utilized and wasted away, and just by you walking around and maybe doing a quick little pump up here and there, you're just going to go flat, and all the carbs that you've been loading are just going to get used up. I think you made a really good point, is like, it doesn't happen that way. They're not really going to just get used up. And if you're not getting a pump, it might not be because you haven't carved up enough. It could be other factors, like you said. It could be electrolyte thing, or it could be a hydration thing too. And I know we've mentioned this before when we're spoken about show day and pumping up. And can you pump up too much and go flat and, you know, use all the carbohydrates that you've been taking in during your peak week? And we said more often than not, that's not the case. You're probably not going to pump up that hard and that much that you're going to lose all that carbohydrate. It could be something else. It could be the fact that it's a hydration thing, an electrolyte thing.
And I think as well, people don't understand. substrate utilization. So in terms of, whether you're biasing carbohydrate as your preferred source of metabolizing and creating energy versus if you're using fats. If you're walking around, you're laying on the couch, you're not using carbohydrate for that unless you're eating, lots of glucose, which is getting into the blood, readily available straight away as you need it. You're using fats. And so that's why we'll typically as well push in a little bit more fat the day of. And it does help to hold the look, and equally can help with satiation as well, because at that point in prep as well, it doesn't matter how much you're eating, you're going to be hungry. And so you're sitting around, you're not doing anything. So sometimes that can make you even hungrier because you had cardio, you had steps, you had training, whereas now you have the couch and Netflix and literally just relaxing. So that carbohydrate's not going anywhere. So I think just be sensible, and hopefully your coaches, collated enough data over the time span to know, where you're at and what you need. And if you don't, then you'll get that from your first show, because you'll either find out what was good and perhaps what's not. And even with trials, you'll still find that the week of, there'll be some little elements of minutia that you can change and that you can troubleshoot to make it better. Something I'll always, with my athletes, even if I'm like, I've got everything mapped out to go perfectly and it still might be 98% everything went great, I'll always still, employ some reflection. Okay, if I was really being hard, what could we have done better? And then how can we try and iron out those creases so the next time around we're even better again? And as long as you have that approach, and if you're literally looking at those really, really minute variables, that's when you know that your athlete, they're obviously at that level, they're getting close to, to going after that pro card. And hopefully that's the level that everyone strives to get to.
Yeah. You gonna say something, MG?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you think about, for most people, when you're training in the gym just on a normal session, it's a 90-minute session, let's just say it's a push session. Think about when the peak of your pump is during that session, right? It's not at the start. It's like, for me, let's say it's 50 to 70 minutes in, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really feeling it now. Then I start to flatten out a little bit. That's with like a full gym, machines, barbells, access. To think that people flatten out after, 10 minutes with a band and some 5 kilo dumbbells when they normally lift 15s. It happens. We hear it all the time, but it's typically, for most people, it's probably under pumping.
Yeah. You hear it sometimes backstage, like, stop pumping up, you're going to flatten out. I was like,
keep going.
If anything, you're going to lose your pump if you stop pumping. Like,
keep going. Like, seriously,
keep
like,
going.
For me, it takes me ages to really feel that pump, and I feel like for most people, they could probably afford to go a little bit harder backstage. Remembering what you're using versus what your body's used to using to get that same pump, right? You're limited in the equipment use. So,
yeah. One more thing I want to touch on, and Scotty kind of mentioned it about, you're eating all this food during peak week, but you can still be hungry. Don't ever think that with all this food during peak week and reducing your volume and your steps and increasing your recovery, that all your prep feels are going to go away. You're still probably going to be tired, hungry, and all those feels. And that's what the recovery in the reverse diet phase is all about, is it takes weeks for those prep feels to go away. So, sometimes we get it from clients, and they're newbies. They've never been through this process, and they'll be like, I'm eating all this food, Michael, but I'm still hungry. I'm still tired. It takes a little bit longer than that. This is just an aesthetic thing that we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to recover you right now. That'll come later.
Yeah.
All right. Do you think we've given people enough kind of information on the basics of peak week and what they should expect at the moment? Hopefully this spurs on more questions as these shows start to evolve, and as we move through the season, hopefully people start to send us a little bit more questions, peak week specific. So hopefully that was enough to get the ball rolling. I'm going to jump into a question. It's a little bit different, but it is basically about competing. We got this question twice, so I think it's in the last 2 weeks. So this person's definitely wants to get an answer on this one, so I'll answer it for them. If a woman is prescribed HRT from a GP for severe menopause symptoms, does that cancel them out of them being natty? And can they not compete in Natty Feds? So I'm sure all the Natty Feds do this, but definitely with this in NBA, is you just need to reach out to the federation, and they're probably going to want to get an understanding of what you're actually taking, maybe get a doctor's certificate, or for your doctor to write a letter to explain it. And then it's up to the federation to then make a decision. So don't think that you're cancelled out. You can get medical exemptions, just you need to provide information to the federation. One thing that people need to understand that's different to how it used to be years and years and years ago. WADA used to actually govern the Natty Feds, and WADA used to make all the decisions. So they used to do the testing, they used to make all the decisions and the rulings. Now, in recent years, the Natty Feds have taken on that responsibility. So even though they might do testing to the WADA standards, they actually hold the responsibility on what the rules should actually be. So it's up to the Fed to actually impose those rules and decide on whether that's something that can be exempt or not. So I would say to this person, just reach out to the Feds or Fed that you want to compete in and just give them all the information, and they'll be able to make a decision. Anything to add on that, boys?
No, it's the same with CBD oil and stuff like that as well. People that might have medicinal reasons for using that, I think it's the same thing. As long as you have a letter and you can justify why you need to use that exogenous compound, then it's at their discretion. Yeah.
Same for like ADHD medication, things like that. So that's normally a big question we get. So
yeah,
just reach out to the Fed. Okay, another one. I really want to compete again. However, my amazing, loving partner who supported me last time has expressed he doesn't want me to compete again. Any advice? What do you think, MG?
Oh man, it's a tough one. I've seen it so many times. It's really hard, man. Like, to not be in your household, in your relationship, but to know where you're at the moment. Is this the only issue? Or is there other things going on and this is just contributing to it? You'd want to really get an understanding as to, what the partner's issues are or concerns are. Ultimately, what are their objections with you competing? And then can you then take that information away, dissect it, and be able to overcome those objections in a fair and honest way? Like, or are the objections that your partner raising something that you need to think about and address? Do you, we understand that, it is a selfish sport and that there are sacrifices that need to be made, but are you someone who potentially, completely cancels out all of your family life and isn't able to live within that realm? For some of us, we can do all the things that we were doing before and find the balance. Yes, we make sacrifices. Maybe we don't eat, or maybe we don't attend certain functions, or we roll up late. But for others, that's not an acceptable response. So it's just going to really depend on you and your partner. But my advice would be, get them to list for you, in a really calm, safe place, what their objections with it are. Take it away. Don't respond immediately. Dissect it and see if there's, a way that you could come back and say, okay, I've heard what you said and I totally understand how you feel. Here's how I think we can overcome these, and see if you can reach a happy medium. I'm not going to sit here and say that a partner's wrong or you should leave your partner, because we don't know what else is going on, and that's just a silly dumb statement to make, and it's not relevant to everybody. But the best piece of advice we can give is that, let them be heard, come back to them with your response in terms of how you'll address it, and see if you can reach a happy medium. If not, you ultimately will need to make that decision. What's more important to me, my happiness, my competing, my goals, or staying in this relationship? Simple as that.
Any thoughts on that, Scotty?
Yeah, I think sort of what MG touched on, I would want to know why they don't want you to compete. Because if it's, if you're being an ass and it reflects on them and it's miserable for them to suffer through it, then I think that's more than fair enough. But as you said, context, we don't have all of the bits and pieces to put all of that together. But I think if you are going through it, it is such a selfish sport. You have to be selfless amongst all of those other avenues, because whether we like it or not, our partners have to make sacrifices as well, because they don't get to go out for dinner. There's no date nights, but you can also, I think you can still do things, but perhaps it's adjusted or amended in the sense that you can go to the movies. They can get popcorn and have an ice cream, whatever, and you can just bring your food with you, or you can just have a Coke Zero. That's something that we do. Or, maybe you can do picnics in the parks instead of going to nice restaurants. You go out for lots of coffees. But I think when you're in prep, you make so much time for your training, for your nutrition, for your prep. It's very easy for your partner to feel like there's no time that's being made for them. So I think that if you're going to do that, for me, I'll always try and go above and beyond so that it doesn't become an issue, but also communicating and checking in. We've spoken about that, the importance of how am I doing? How am I going? It's normal just to give you a heads up. we're almost 5 weeks out now. My energy levels are going to be lower. Maybe I'm talking slower. I sound less enthusiastic. It's not the case. It's just that my body's conserving energy. If there's, things that you want to do, can we maybe do them in the morning when I've got more energy versus late at night? So I think as long as you're transparent and there's a bit of give and take, and equally there needs to be that understanding on your end, because your partner's made sacrifices too. But as you said, we can't really, I don't think we can really comment too much because we don't have the intricacies of whatever that relationship entails.
Yeah.
I think the most common sort of scenario where I would say, I wonder if you guys agree, is like when there's a competitor who has a partner who really enjoys social drinking and eating.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most common, because they just don't go hand in hand. I don't know what the answer is for that scenario, but that seems to be, where I see the most common issues is, where you've got a partner where a lot of your inner circle, your family and friends, all of your catch-ups and social space is built around food and alcohol. So, maybe your partner feels like, well, if you're going to go through this prep, you're not going to be eating like I am. You're not going to be drinking like I am. So I'm going to have to miss out on all these things. So if that's the case, is there a way that you can present, a scenario where, they get access to be able to do that, once or twice a week, where you're there, but you're not partaking? Or is that still not going to be enough for them? Is it only if you partake, they'll be happy? Well, then, that's not necessarily a good place to be in either. If, the only way your partner's happy is if you're eating shit and drinking shit because it makes them feel safe.
Or doing what they want, for that matter, too, because you should have your own choice. I mean, we spoke about that at the retreat, MT. Remember, we were at the beach club and most people there were drinking, and, we were even talking to Alex about it. And, like, for example, I don't drink alcohol, but in no way, shape or form did I feel like anyone was like, oh, you got to drink, you got to do that. Nor was I begrudging anyone else for wanting to do that. It's like, you do you, that's cool, and I'll do me. But equally, you can still be there and partake. But if people want to go out, like you might stay till like 9:30 or 10, and it's like, that's me done. But you guys go and enjoy. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still be there. But if you're sitting in the corner sulking, like, let's go home, while you're looking at your watch, then that's a different story. So I can kind of see both, both sides. But as you said, if you're someone who's not into all of those things, but your partner is, then that is maybe a different discussion on its own, because if you have different values and different priorities, then, are you really aligned longitudinally? Like, for me, that's something that would probably, I wouldn't be best suited to be in a relationship with someone that wants to go out and party all the time, because that's not something that I'm interested in. But equally, you can't begrudge someone if that's what they want to do, then that's cool. That's why everyone's uniquely different. But equally, if you're someone who likes to go out and have a nice dinner, and we like to do those things as well, I think there's a difference between that. Maybe that's something you can't go out and have that dinner, but maybe you can go out and have a really nice picnic, and you can buy lots of nice meats and cheeses or whatever, and you can eat out of your Tupperware, but your partner can still indulge in that. They can have some champagne if they want to do that, whatever it may be, but it's give and take. It's like all things.
Yeah, I think you guys touched on a really, really good point. I would almost say is, if your lifestyle in prep is drastically different to your lifestyle in off season, I'd say you actually be having battles in the off season, because if they like to drink, party, eat junk all the time, you can't do those things in the off season anyway if you want to be super productive. So I'd say you're probably having those battles now in your off season. But if it's not such a drastic change, and it's, you normally go out for dinner once or twice a week and things like that, then there's going to have to be a little bit of give and take. And as you said, Scotty, maybe you can do all those things too and not begrudge anyone, or not be the sourpuss or anything like that. I think that if your partner is saying, I don't like the fact that you're tired, I don't like the fact that you're hungry, I don't like the fact that you have no sex drive, they're things you can't fix. Like, those things are going to happen in prep. So maybe there's some things that they might raise a concern that you might not be able to do anything about, because it's just part and parcel of the prep process. So maybe I think it's really has to be a conversation to find out exactly what it is that they're not super keen about. I'd even say, and I know that I'm sure you guys are open to this, and this happened to me in the past too, is get your partner to talk to your coach too. And maybe your coach can then help them with any of the things that they're worried about and give them some advice too, and maybe put them at ease in some way. I know I've done it before. I've also done it with parents for younger clients, and they're going into a prep for the first time, and the parents want to actually talk to me. Have you ever done that before, MG? Spoken? Yeah, I've spoken to parents. Yeah, spoken to parents, and they're like,
I've spoken to your clients' parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, anything to support. But yeah, that definitely makes a difference. I think speaking, especially with younger clients and parents, it's definitely different. I mean, I've offered, to talk to clients' partners in the past with, and just from a factual point of view of like, here's what to expect. Here's how I think you guys could move through it. But they don't tend to take that up very often. I think they don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. So
yeah. And also, just lastly on this point, don't put them in a position where you're going to have a false sense of security, where you're going to sell them some lies, and then you go through prep and you promised all these things and you don't deliver. So you need to have a really open and honest conversation. All right, let's move on. What would you be, or what career would you have followed if you had your time over again? MG?
Oh man, I've done so many different jobs leading up to where I'm now, and I absolutely love what I'm doing now. But you know what? If I had my time again, I would be a chiropractor.
Oh yeah?
I'm just obsessed with cracking backs and necks. I really would, man. And you know what? It's not like, it's like saying, oh, I'd be a professional basketball or I'd be like a professional golfer. I love basketball and I love golf. I could actually go and do the studies and be a chiropractor. So like, if I had my time again, I would pursue that. Or you know what else, man? Having now gone through this process, I would be a midwife. A man's allowed to be a midwife, right?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd be a midwife, man. It's such a beautiful thing.
Interesting. Oh man, I would not have picked you to say that for sure.
Yeah. Chiropractor or midwife? Yeah.
What about you, Scotty?
I love what I'm doing, so I would say that. Otherwise, maybe a pediatrician.
Okay.
Like working as
you'd be a great pediatrician, man.
As a doctor specializing with little kids and that. I think I found it so interesting going through that process, and equally I had some with our pediatrician, like learning so much, and equally to be able to see that, but equally I also understand there'd be some very challenging elements to it, which would be hard too. But yeah, I'd still say probably what I'm doing, but otherwise if I wasn't, maybe that.
So just while I forget, before we go to MT off air, can you give me a good GP referral for a doctor around where we live?
Yeah, bro. I'll give you as in like an actual pediatrician. Did you have Brendan Chan at Freemasons? Did you see him? For anything that's like really important, definitely I'll send you his details, but equally I'll send you
shout out to Brendan Chan.
Tag him.
What about you, guys?
For me, I think whatever I'm doing, I need to be doing something where I put in work and I see a physical result. So, because that's why I liked engineering, that's why I like what I do now, is because you put in work and then it transforms into a physical result. That, and I think second thing is it needs to do something that I'm doing something and it helps others. So, if I was just doing some work and like what I was doing at ANZ, like I was a project manager, cool, but there was no physical result. Like, yeah, sure, we created a new system that could detect fraud on people's credit cards, like whatever, but it wasn't anything physical. I could never say to, hey, MG, take a look at this. It'd be like, what am I looking at? Like this. Yeah. So I think it has to help people, and my work has to transform into a physical result. So I think I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I love it. I enjoy it. Okay. I know we have to go, so let's finish off on these. Out of the three of you, who wins the following? An eating contest. First one. Who wins that? It's got to be, not me, because I can't eat as, like, who do you reckon out of you two?
I reckon Scott might pick me. I mean, we've both eaten high food. I just think he's done it more.
Probably.
So, like, we've never sat down and, like, gone head-to-head eating a lot of food, but I just feel like he's done more of it for longer. I've been super high, too. I'm going to say Scotty.
I'd say Scotty too.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Sleeping contest.
Not me.
Well, right now, man, I
think MT.
Yeah, I think MG probably needs more sleep out of all of us, but I reckon I'd probably win because I'm used to having a lot of sleep. So.
Yeah.
Running contest. Let's call it sprinting. Who do you reckon's the quickest out of us?
I know,
I can't remember the last time I've sprinted other than chasing after kids at the park.
I've done some running in recent times, but nothing like just 5K type stuff. But I mean, I played sport my whole, right until I was 30, I was still playing basketball from like the age of 6, and I played everything. So like I could run, but I just don't know if it's fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels fast to me, but I'm not.
Yeah. I know I did athletics growing up, so I reckon I might have this one.
Hey, there's one thing that we literally could do. We could do a running race.
We could. I mean, I got an athletics track down my street.
All right. So this is what we'll do. I'll verse MT while you're away, and then the winner will face you when you get back.
Are we talking like a time trial, or are you talking about a sprint?
No, like a sprint, like 100-meter sprint.
100 meter. Yeah. Definitely going to stretch out the hammies and make sure the body is on the middle.
Can we in the next couple of weeks? Can we do this?
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, of course. Let's do it.
Do it.
And then winner will face Scotty when he gets home.
You know I'm going to be practicing, bro. You know
that's not going to be very fair because I'm going to be. By the time I get back, I'm going to be pushing triple digits. I'll get puffed walking from my car to the bottom of the track.
Going for a run as soon as we get off this body.
And the last one, who out of us 3 would win a bodybuilding show?
Yeah,
that's.
I think Scotty's going to take the cake there very easily.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. I know with the time difference, it's a bit later for you, Scotty, so I know you need to go.
Yeah, I'm going to literally jump in the car.
Next week, we'll now be out of daylight savings, so we'll go back to having 11 hours difference, so we'll be good to go.
Yeah, we'll be good.
I just wanted to wish everyone all the best for whoever's competing this weekend. Best of luck. We are cheering for you guys, and hopefully all goes well and you have an amazing experience. So all the best to everyone on the weekend.
Yeah, good luck, guys. Take care, everybody.
Guys.
All right. See you guys. Take care.
Chat soon. See you guys.
Bye.